A lot of competing interests, but the bottom line, it's clear climate change is already making areas of the planet unlivable. So millions of folks have no choice but to move.
Just how big will the issue of climate migration become? That's our next burning question.
24 million people globally have moved because of the changing climate. But that's 24 million that we know of. We're talking about enormous amount of people, entire generations trying to find a place to live.
Across the globe, millions are at risk of losing more than just their land. Their culture, their way of life, their very identity is at the mercy of the changing climate. To capture the oral history of communities at the forefront of climate change, independent journalist Chandrani Sinha traveled down India's Brahmaputra River, chronicling the traditional folk songs of those who call the riverbanks home.
You will see a lot of similarities of the stories. The emotions are similar, but the stories of every village is different.
আপনি যে কথা বলছেন আমার চোখে জল আসে কারণ এই নদী আমরা ছোট সময় থেকে ভাবি এই বছরে এই জায়গাটা রাখবে কিন্তু রাখে না।
The songs of loss and longing Sinha recorded share stories of land gone due to the flooding and erosion of the river basin, and traditions eroding along with it.
Tomorrow, if water comes and it just take away everything of mine, what will I be? So you will feel the sorrow, the sadness in their songs.
It's a sadness that transcends international borders. The fear of loss felt on the riverbanks of India, the same fears felt thousands of miles away throughout the fields of America's heartland.
Lately, climate change has made farming really hard.
In the series Through Our Eyes, documentarians Jim and Talleah McMahon chronicle the climate crisis through the eyes of children.
The issue of climate change is only going to become more and more relevant to future generations. They're the people who really have to grapple with this.
I've lived here 11 years, which is my entire life, and so is Leo.
This farm occupies a very special place in my heart. It's been in the family for 163 years.
Since 2016, 6.5 million Americans have faced climate displacement.
Because of flooding and drought, they're coming to the realization that this is just not sustainable.
The weather has been changing, so we had like a huge drought, and then there's a ton of rain for like a week or two.
Or we have 8-degree temperatures at the end of October, and then it's 60 in January.
If the weather patterns are changing from historical norms, what happens is that it disrupts the yield of crops and makes it so that people earn less money. That's a recipe for disaster.
Losing the business also means losing your home. And the girls are very aware of this.
Any kid can tell when their parents are stressed out. I don't want to move, but it'd give us enough money to pay off like a lot of our debt that we used for farming. But I want to stay here, of course.
Shortly after we finished filming, they ended up moving to a teaching farm in Virginia. And so the girls do live on a farm currently. It's not their farm, but they still get to have that life that they love.
In Texas, the McMahons follow another young girl and her family, displaced by Hurricane Harvey and the flooding that followed.
I was 6 when Hurricane Harvey hit.
In 2017, Hurricane Harvey was heading for the Texas Gulf Coast, and Mariah and her family went to stay with family in Houston because they live in a rural area that might have been hit harder.
The wind was howling, and it just like kept raining hard. The lights would just keep on going on and off.
After the flooding subsided, the family went back to see what had happened with their home. It was devastating. Mariah's grandfather built the house. She had only ever known that house.
When we finally arrived to her house, we were shocked.
You could see the literal wires.
It was sad. My mother was born in the house.
One thing I was particularly surprised by is how long it takes families to recover. You see that in Mariah's story. So when we meet them, it's 3 years later. Their home is in the process of being rebuilt, and they have to live in a motel.
This desk is where I do my school every day, and I try to move stuff so I can have a space to eat.
Mariah's grandmother makes a choice that a lot of Americans make regardless of their financial situation, which is to stay in their communities.
I frequently wondered why people don't leave after multiple disasters. And I no longer question that. When you don't have the resources, the reality of it is that there's not really anywhere for them to go. We live in California, which is experiencing its own climate crisis.
We have fires, a water shortage. It is unclear how long we can stay here. How do you know when it's time to leave?
For many, the time to leave is now. Changing weather patterns and rising sea levels are forcing millions from their homes across the globe.
An unexpected tide swept away Zainabou Fall's home. With it, a lifetime of memories.
In Senegal, it's an all too common story. Journalists Nicolas Haque and Hugo Bogart documented the devastating consequences as the sea swallows part of Senegal's historic coastline.
I want to go to places that are underreported. That's why I came to Dakar, Senegal.
The eye of the world is not really focused on this part of the world, which is a shame because people are definitely suffering here.
We're being forced to live a difficult life here. This was supposed to be temporary, and we're living here now for 2 years. There's no food, no help, and no sign from authorities anything will change. We won't be able to return home.
This rising ocean has become a curse. This place where they could fish is no longer a place where they can fish because there's less fish in the ocean. Not only that, their homes are being destroyed. So they have only one solution, is to leave.
With nowhere left to go, many are forced to escape by boat, facing dangerous seas in search of a safer place to live.
People are desperate now. That's why so many young people are leaving Saint-Louis to try to get to Europe.
They get on a boat, they leave their families behind, and some of them just disappear.
They take their traditional Senegalese fishing boats. The sea is very unpredictable, causing many boats to capsize, and people just drown because they don't know how to swim.
No one wants to leave their homes. No one wants to really migrate and leave the land that generations have lived upon. If they could live happily in their environment, they would just stay where they are. But they're forced to do it because they're trying to find a safer place to live.
For Nick, the feeling of loss and mourning is personal.
I'm a second-generation climate migrant. My parents left Bangladesh because their home disappeared into the water. Not being able to go back to that pond where my mother learned how to swim. Not able to see that history. There's an immense sense of grief.
As land and identities slip away into the rising ocean and huge populations are forced to leave their homelands, we are at great risk of losing our collective human history. Who will carry on the stories of those left behind?
The city that is disappearing and all these other coastal cities have a deep history. That's why I think it's really important for us to try to preserve those cities and to tell the story of climate change and how this is affecting not only our environment, but our human history.